please join me in an attitude of prayer? Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that each and every delegate takes something important from this week to build upon daily and use as a guidance to excel in life. We give thanks to the American Legion for allowing all delegates this opportunity that has and will better shape our lives. We give thanks to RSU for allowing us to use this amazing campus. We give thanks to all the staff and counselors for their dedication and time they have put into each and every city. As we approach the end of a week that will last a lifetime, I pray for the bright days ahead, as well as a bright future for all delegates, counselors, and other Boise State staff. In your glorious name I pray. Amen.
Hello. Good evening, Boise State. How you doing? If you don't know, my name's Clay Ballinger. I'm Director Emeritus, but most importantly, I'm the Senior Counselor for Smith City. But who's the best city in here? I don't know. I love it. I love it. I love the enthusiasm. I want you to keep that up tonight, guys. This is by far, year to year, one of the most exciting and enjoyable events of Boise State. You may not believe it, but you'll know by the time we're done, okay? Here in just a second, I'm going to bring out some legislators from the State House of Representatives. I'm going to let them introduce themselves shortly, but right now I want you to all stand and give a big round of applause to the delegation for the State of Oklahoma House of Representatives.
I'm taking this seat. It's me and you, Alfonso.
Anywhere you want to sit, Brian. You get to pick your seat anywhere you want. Thank you so much. Thank you, buddy. Except that one. Thank you. Take your seats. You can see how excited these young men are. I'm going to give each representative a chance to take a couple minutes, introduce themselves, tell us what district they represent, and if they choose to, anything they might be focusing on. They're in special session right now, so they are still working, and some of them drove all the way across the state to be with you tonight, late night, on a holiday week, so we greatly appreciate that. And we're going to start, of course, with ladies first with Representative Swope.
Can you hear me? Is it? Okay. All right. Sorry, I forgot to turn my mic on. Well, I'm Representative Amanda Swope. I represent House District 71 out of Tulsa. It runs along the Riverside area from 81st into downtown. This is my first session. I'm a freshman this year, just got elected last November. What all would you like me to tell you about me?
Whatever you'd like.
Let's see. Well, I have a really long background in working in politics and policy. I currently still work for my tribe, the Muskogee Nation, as their juvenile justice director. Before that, I was their self-governance analyst, and I'd been working in politics and campaigns since about 2011. I worked on Drew Edmondson's campaign back in 2018, and I was also the chair of the Tulsa County Democratic Party before running. And so that's kind of what led me to being in office. Some of my biggest priorities while I'm there are obviously tribal issues and the conversation that's been going on with tribes across the state. Criminal justice reform, working in criminal justice, that's definitely a passion of mine. My district has a very large progressive presence, so issues like LGBTQ issues matter to them a lot. They're also very pro-choice in my area. And working in politics for as long as I have, I would say anything that gives people access to voting rights is a priority of mine as well.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. We'll go back and forth. Representative Fettgater.
Good evening. How is everyone? Hey, y'all mind if I step up here, turn around, get my buddies up here, and we take a selfie with y'all? Y'all mind? Come on, stand it up.
Keep it classy. Keep it classy.
Come on now. Be nice, but be crazy too. All right, here we go. All right, thank you very much. Yeah. Scott Fettgetter, Oklahoma House District 16. I am in my 7th year, 14 sessions. That's just what we do, in the famous words of John Eccles, is we just special session all the time. I represent Okmulgee County primarily, a portion of Muskogee County, and a portion of Tulsa County. Good to be with you. Look forward to your questions.
Speaking of Eccles, we have another Eccles in the room this year. Stand up, Mr. Eccles. His brother was here recently. Representative Arturo.
Can everyone hear me fine?
Probably have to move it closer.
Better move that mother up.
Hello? I'll just hold it in that case. Yeah, good evening, y'all. Like you mentioned, my name is Representative Arturo Alonso Sandoval. I represent a district in South Oklahoma City. That's a part of town I grew up in, a part of town I care a lot about. Is there a lot of kind of...
We got you. We can hear you. Right there is perfect.
Sweet. Yeah, and a year ago, if you would have asked me that I would be serving as the youngest member of the State House of Representatives, I'd have thought you were crazy. And I say that because a year ago, the plan for me was not to get into the world of politics. A year ago, I was graduating from OU with my degree in mechanical engineering. And the plan for me was to move down to Austin, Texas, and to pursue a job down there as an engineer. But a year ago, I made the decision to run for office because, for one, I care a lot about Oklahoma. I care a lot about making sure that this state really works for the people in all communities. I'm a first-generation college student, a college graduate, first in my family to go to high school and graduate. So there's a lot of adversity and a lot of resilience that I've been able to build up due to my life experiences, even though I haven't lived as much life as most people in this stage. But I care a lot. I'm always willing to learn and listen to people. And one of the cool things I've learned so far, just one session under my belt, is that everyone is their own pocket of wisdom. So I'm excited to learn more about my colleagues and really see how we can continue making sure Oklahoma is and continues to be a great state. So I'm excited to hear y'all's questions and excited to be up here talking with my colleagues.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. I forgot to mention that this guy right here about 32 years ago married my sister, so he's my brother-in-law too. So don't hold that against me. I mean him. Representative West.
Just spill water on me. Hey, how are you? I'm Josh West. I've been in for 7 years. Fett and I came in together back in 16, so I think this is my 4th or 5th year to come here to Boise State. Fettgetter's got a year up on me, but I always look forward to coming here and hearing your questions. There's not a question that is off the table. You can ask any topic you want, whether it's, if you're happy, sad, mad, whatever. We want to hear the stuff that, most of the stuff you're going to ask, I'm assuming is going to be stuff in the media, and if it's in the media, it's usually pretty contentious, and so ask whatever you want, but I always look forward to being here, and you guys always have good questions. I seen Eccles' son here. Someone told me that Corey Williams had a boy here. Where you at? There he is. Hey. So Corey and I served together for a couple years, and I will tell you what, Corey and I were way different, but I appreciated Corey because he got up and he did his thing. We had some good debates, but I miss that, honestly. When Corey and Proctor and Inman, those guys left, it's not the same up there. Not that these are freshmen and they will get good, but they knew the rules better than anybody there. And this was our freshman year, and so your dad hemmed us up a little bit, but I miss him. He was on the floor last year. He came on the floor with Proctor and Inman. I said, you know what, you're still a sorry SOB, but I miss you, and I miss the conversations we used to have. So anyway, I represent District 5, so it's Delaware County, Mays County, all the Grand Lake area, and like I said, we're looking forward to your questions. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, sir. And last but most certainly not least, Representative Moore.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me? Am I on? All right. Fantastic. Boise State alum, 1999. I am proud to be back with my fellow Boise Staters. I'm from Clinton, Oklahoma, which is 90 miles west of Oklahoma City. There we go. That's right. House District 57. I represent Custer County, Roger Mills County, and the west half of Beckham County, so I go all the way to the Texas Panhandle, up and down. He referred to my 3-hour drive and a long night home because I've got an early morning tomorrow morning. I'm a lawyer by trade. Before this, I never thought I'd ever be here. When I was sitting here in Boise State, I didn't run for office because that was never going to be my plan. And I remember a lot of my Boise State time and look back on it fondly. But the reason I decided to do this was because I have 3 little kids. I have 2 girls and a boy, and I wanted to give back to those that came before me and make a better path for them. And so I do this for y'all. The reason I do this, there's several of us here that are in the prime of our career, and it's hard to step away because you're losing a lot of money to be there. But we do it for a better Oklahoma, and we do it for y'all, for the next generation. So appreciate y'all being here and look forward to getting to know you a little better through this.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's give them all one big hand before we get started with our questions. All right, Boise Staters, we've done this all week. You know what to do. We're going to call on you, stand up, talk loud, tell us what your name is, where you're from, and ask a question, okay? And as Representative West said, nothing is off the table, but don't ask them what kind of pizza is their favorite or something silly like that. Good questions. I know you will. Start way in the back, and you're going to have to talk really loud.
My name is Mason January, currently with the King chapter from Sand Springs. Is it worth being a city council or state council or state representative?
What do you mean?
Absolutely.
Is it worth the time and energy put into?
Good question. Anybody want to start?
I'll start it real quick. Just, I would tell you, since Fake and I came in 16, so we started campaigning in 15, and it was a lot of work to get here. But honestly, it's the most. I'll put it this way: I remember when I got sworn in November 2016. I've got 3 predecessors still living: Dr. Cox, Rick Littlefield, and Joe Hutch, 2 Republicans. Dr. Cox is a Republican, and Joe Hutch and Rick are Democrats, and they all said the same thing when. It was in November 16 after the election. It was a week after the election. I was driving up to the Capitol, and they called and they said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I don't know, man. This is crazy, man. You're driving up and you see the dome." And they all said, "You know what? If you ever pull out of your apartment and you don't feel that way, then go home because you're wasting tax dollars." I've always kept that in the forefront of my mind. But it's a lot of work, but it's a very rewarding job because their sole purpose up here, honestly, is to help people. So usually when somebody calls you with an issue, they're at their they're in dire need of help, honestly, because they've probably went through every avenue of approach they can and haven't been able to get help. And so normally you can pick up the phone and call it, whether it's an agency head or if it's a federal issue, you can call somebody from the federal delegation, and you can help them. So I think it's awesome. I mean, and if you get up there and you change them, you don't stay humble, then your constituents will see that, and they'll take care of that. They'll take care of that themselves. But the short answer, yes, it absolutely is worth it.
I would say, this is my 3rd year. There are days, every job, I don't care what you are. I'm an attorney by trade, so my job is to help people, and people come to me at their worst point, a lot. I do oil and gas and real property and general litigation, and it's always, hey, I spent thousands of dollars and I got nothing for it. What do I do? They're always in a dark spot. And every job, there are days that you beat your head on the wall and wonder, why am I doing this? But 99 out of 100, it's really uplifting. And it's not the stories. You're not going to ever see the story in the news that are the ones that really make an impact on you. It's the ones where you help a lady get her Social Security, and that's the only way she can make ends meet month to month, pay her bills, and actually have something left over. That's not the sexy story that you're going to hear on TV. State rep saves lady's electric bill. That just doesn't sell, right? But those are the things that matter the most. I think one of the most humbling things I did this year, just the other day, we had a bridge dedication. We got a bridge named after a guy who worked for the Department of Transportation for 40 years, and his family just bawling, and they treat me like one of theirs now, and it's those stories. That's what makes it worth it. It's just the one-on-one things. I'm not in it for the big deal. I don't have plans to run down the line. I never plan to be here. God's in control of that. But just helping people where they're at, find where they're at, and make an impact in their life wherever they are. That's why I do it. And so, yes, it is worth it for that reason.
Yeah, and then I can follow with that. So I'd say, being one of the first-year members that's a Democrat, being a part of the minority party, success looks completely different to us than it does to being a part of the majority party. And sometimes, just to get one bill passed or even heard, we have to work so much harder to get so much less done. Which can make it kind of like, man, like, what am I doing? But going back to what they were mentioning, there's so much impact you can make on the constituents, the people that you represent, giving them a voice, being able to amplify their stories, and making sure that they feel heard, that their perspectives are being considered whenever we think about legislation, whenever we think about the next laws that are going to, dictate the way people live their lives in the state of Oklahoma. So there's a lot of value in that. There's a lot of, I think, growth I know I've been able to experience just these few months in the world of politics, because it does make you so much better of a person, because you're better able to really build that empathy and understanding for people that come from a completely different background than my own. And being right now one of the younger guys in politics, that's something that's helped me really understand. Even though I don't agree with all my colleagues, it really helps me understand more why they vote a certain way or why they have a certain perspective. So I think in addition to really benefiting so many people in our state, there's a lot of personal growth that I know as a state representative you're able to experience.
As a freshman, I think Arturo and I have a similar experience, especially being both Democrats. I would say, managed to make it through this session still having probably a little bit of rose-colored glasses for the legislature, despite that it was what people have described as a very difficult year. But I think that I put a lot of effort this year on our off times to go and visit schools within my district, which was honestly very good respite care. I recommend it to all of my colleagues if they don't take the chance to do that back in district, because being able to speak to people you all's age and even younger really can help put things in perspective, reminds you why you're there. And I guess kind of now being home from everything and looking at it with reflection, it really just makes me want to continue to look at the process and identify how that can be something that I communicate more to my constituents. And how can I get their feedback as people that I'm supposed to represent more? How can I educate them on the inconsistencies or the shortfalls of the current process and things like that? So for me, it's just about looking at it in ways of how can I communicate with the people I represent better going forward.
Just real briefly, I would say that it's not a Republican thing or a Democrat thing to pass a law. A law is hard to pass, period. Now, if my good friend over here, the Democrat Party, will write good laws, we'll probably listen to some of those. But what you see on the news and at the Capitol is not the fulfillment you get running in this seat. It's what happens on your cell phone and at a community event. Those types of things are where you really get to help people, and you help them one-on-one. So that's the most rewarding piece.
Don't let him lie to you all. I gave him an idea for a bill 2 weeks ago. So.
I think she's a fighter. What do y'all think? The other thing we probably don't see much of is, and I think you all would probably agree, that there's a lot of things that they are able to agree on and pass, and that doesn't make the news. Probably
85% of everything we vote on is done in a bipartisan way. It's something from an agency. Agency's requested something, so most things we vote on, it's a bipartisan support. It's the contentious stuff, like I mentioned, that the TV picks up, and we like to watch it. That's why they play it. There's a lot of people that wake up every morning and want to be mad. So, that's why the news plays that stuff.
I would say, I'm gonna rub on them tonight if y'all don't mind, and they're probably gonna rub back on me. But at the end of the day, we hang out, we can go have dinner, we can have lunch together. We don't hate each other. The biggest thing you could take away from this tonight is what you see on social media is fake news. That's not how it really works in the real world of politics. I don't hate them, and they don't hate me. We're actually friends. One of Josh West's best friends is a guy that came in when we did. He was a Democrat, and we're all great friends, and we get along. But when we walk in that chamber, make no mistake about it, we fight vehemently on that House floor over our principles and our ideals and those things. But we walk out of there as friends.
Well, it's like I mentioned Corey. He taught me some great lessons. My first debate I ever gave in 2017, after we came in, Corey came up and shook my hand and said, "You did a hell of a job, Wes." And so Corey and I didn't agree on a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, my constituents don't vote for Corey; they vote for me. And so, but I appreciated the conversations from people who disagree with me, honestly.
Okay, let's go right here in the glasses. Stand up. I'm sorry, right here first, and then you, Michael.
My name is Jalen Patterson. I'm from Tuttle, Big Low District, and I'm representing Bryan City. And my question is, y'all have already shown that y'all are friends, but how do y'all work to keep decorum in the House when y'all are debating over this?
We allow decorum to go on in the Senate. We get down like romper room in the House. I mean, we've since Josh and I've been in the House. I mean, I've literally nearly been in fistfights on the House floor, and I'm still friends with the people that I was nearly in a fistfight with. We keep decorum because we do that out of respect. But make no mistake about it, it gets a little bit rambunctious on the House side. The Senate side, it's like the old
like a
Hoax
retirement
farm.
village,
Yeah, it's
you
like
would say.
retired home.
What's Scott's nickname?
Scotty Rocket.
Oh, I thought it was
The
Peacock.
peacock. The
Or
peacock.
I mean,
Anybody
Scotty
else?
Rocket was
A
from
man in many names.
He cut his hair, so the peacock's kind of gone a little bit. But no, I mean, the reality is, at the end of the day, and it's been touched on, how many of you guys watch TV shows, whatever your favorite series is, where everybody gets along all the time and there's no drama? Nobody. You wouldn't watch it. You turn it off. And that's what sells ads on news, and so that's why the news is what it is. That's why social media is what it is, because that's what sells. That's what sells ad space. That's what, pays the bills for the people that are making money for that stuff. And so that's the stuff you see, 80, 85, 90% of the time, and quite frankly, some of my favorite legislation, you'll see 70 Republicans and 15 Democrats, but then there's some Republicans and some Democrats that both vote no together too. And so, I mean, that's just the way it works. And we all have different districts. I mean, my district, Tuttle, being from Clinton, my area, I have, 2,400 square miles. How many square miles do you have?
11.
Yeah, 11. Roger Mills County, I got 1,200 square miles for 600 primary voters. 2 square miles per vote in my primary. So it's a different world, and so our issues can't be the same. There's no way. And when I came to Boise State, it was in Miami, but that was the first time in my life that I thought Tulsa was like next to Missouri. Tulsa was way over there on the east side of the state, and now I realize it's not even close. I go to Josh's house, and I drive as far past Tulsa
You got
as I
3
do
miles and you can be in Missouri.
to get to Tulsa. So the reality is we keep decorum because we have a standard to uphold, and it gets contentious. I mean, there's been, Colin Waukee, the Democrat we named that are one of our best friends. He and I went to law school together. He and another member about went outside. I thought we were going to have to separate them, and it gets contentious. I got yelled at on the floor a few times this year by colleagues, I think, on both sides. So, but at the end of the day, you're doing the people's work, and it's my job to go home, and no matter whether I do it exactly like they think I should or not, it's about how you do it. And if I can go home and hold my head high and know that I did what I thought to be the right thing, the right way, for the right reason, then I can explain it. And if I can't do that, then I was wrong.
Anybody else on that topic?
I can answer it a little bit. I think as a Democrat, obviously our attempt at maintaining decorum looks a little bit differently. I know that as a woman, I've had to do this. Some of you young men may have to also, but there's an element of managing up to people. This is kind of the same thing. Not necessarily managing up to them, but recognizing that the further you push an issue, the more your own bills might get held up. And so you have to really weigh that cost of how much do you want to stick your neck out there and make a big deal about a bill that somebody else is pushing forward if you want to get your own heard that day and things like that. So it's just kind of about balancing all the priorities, I would say.
You think that's because you're a woman, though?
Because they're what?
No, you mentioned because you're a woman. Do you think how does that play into getting your bills heard?
I would just say like managing up. Sometimes we're in roles where you have to kind of take extra note of your superior person's feelings, emotions, or maybe workload, things like that, where you're addressing that and how you deal with them.
You feel like it's because you're in the minority or because you're a female?
Well, I mean, both. In that building.
Interesting. Well, in that building, I would just like to recognize there are a lot of Republican women as well as Democrat women, and I don't sense. I've never worked on a bill or voted for a bill or heard a bill in my committee or didn't hear a bill in a committee because of gender. I hear bills based on the merit of what's in the bill. And I have a reputation. I chair the House Finance Committee. I kill a lot of legislation in my committee. But never, ever does it come down to is it a man or a woman. So I would say that it's that may feel that way, but I wouldn't think it's that way from my point of view.
That's good.
Welcome to the hot seat, huh?
And at least for me, I mean, since it's my first year, I'm still learning. I'm still trying to understand how anything works. And sometimes one day you'll see something, and then the next day it's something completely different. Even with the rules, I mean, the rules that we work by, they're changing consistently. And depending on what's happening, because there's politics being played at so many different levels. That's one of the big lessons I learned after this first session, because there's politics being played within the chambers, the House and the Senate, between the legislature and the executive branch, Dems and Republicans. So there's politics being played at so many different levels. And I've learned to really appreciate it whenever some colleagues on both sides of the aisle really try to ensure that we do maintain decorum. My seatmate, Forrest Bennett, he does a really good job because I think he's passionate about the process, and some members that get on the speaker's chair, they'll just mumble through some stuff, and it's like, oh, like why are we doing this? We got to make sure the people, even if it's not a lot of people watching the live proceedings of the sessions, they're still able to understand what's going on, because like what Representative Moore said, we're doing the people's work, so we got to make sure people are being focused on, people are being put at the forefront whenever we think about legislation. And oftentimes that isn't the case. I think oftentimes there is this kind of push to try to get things done as quick as possible, which, I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes that is something that I know I'll be feeling burnt out. I'm like, holy crap, I kind of want this to end. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot of sacrifices each one of us has to make, and I think that's one of the things that some colleagues do tend to forget, that we have to respect the process to make sure that people understand what's going on. Because at the end of the day, I mean, politics impacts every single aspect of our lives, whether we want it to or not. So making sure that people understand what's going on, I think, is something that there's a lot of colleagues that really try to protect that, and I really, really learned to appreciate that in a way.
It also goes beyond that. You know, Force is big on the time, and everything we do up there is live streamed on audio, video, you name it. Force does get hung up on, we only had this much time to read a bill. But the quorum also goes beyond that. It's about when there's a member that, I can't walk on the House floor without wearing a suit and tie. Females have to wear business attire to walk on the House floor. For males and females, it's business attire. When I see a member walk on the floor with a sweatshirt that says "keep abortion free and legal," I'm like, they're not following decorum themselves, and so that people get spun up on that too when they see that. And if we're going to follow the rules, we're going to follow the rules. If we're not going to follow the rules, then let's don't follow any rules. That's always been a contentious point in our caucus.
Okay, another question. Michael, you still have a question?
Yes, sir.
Stand up.
Michael Orlovich, Tulsa, Oklahoma. I am with lovely Smith City. But what kinds of bills in legislature have y'all passed about abortion lately?
Abortion is the
You name
topic.
I don't think we passed any on abortion.
Who wants to jump
this
on it
year.
first?
I'm not sure there's not a rock or a stone unturned when it comes to legislation on pro-life issues. Seemed like there weren't quite as many this year as there have been in the past, but I mean, abortion and pro-life issues are very
10, 12 bills a year.
Yeah. When we first got in the legislature, we would have like 10 pro-life bills every session, gun bills, those kinds of things. I don't think there's a stone that we've left unturned when it comes to that issue.
I don't think we passed any related specifically to abortion this session. The only thing that we did was codify the right to contraception and separated it basically from what's considered to be any abortion type care.
Okay. Way in the back, Governor.
Thank you. My name is David Wall. I'm from Denver, Oklahoma, and I represent Scott City. My question is, I know that the House of Rep, it's not busy every day from the day that it's taken. I know it's a high-stress environment, a lot of pressure. My question is, how do you guys deal
Well, I'll start on that one. You have to have healthy release, right? You have to, when I'm at home, I can go check cows, I can go to the farm, roll, gravel roads, windows down, country music blaring, and get my time away. When you're in the Capitol, you don't get that. And the thing about this job, it's not physically taxing at all. The most physical thing I do all day is walk from the second floor to the fourth floor up the stairs, and so, but you get done at the end of the day, and I'll call my wife, and I'm just mentally done. My brain has just been on from the minute I woke up to the minute I get home. We have an apartment where a bunch of us live at different apartments kind of by each other. And so you have to find, you've got to find a release. And that's, I don't care if you're a senior and you've got the stress of applying for college or getting ready for whatever's next for you. You've got to find healthy releases that you're able to get that out. Josh mentioned, we got a group of guys, we get together and we play dominoes at night because it takes very little effort to add to 5 and 10 and 15, and that's about as high as I can add by 5. And then, just hang out and de-stress. We listen to music. He plays the guitar and we sing around, and just you've got to find a way to get the stress out in a healthy way. And so that would be my advice on that. And that's kind of how I deal with it.
As you go through your junior and senior year, I want to take you way back to your childhood. Time out. Teach yourself to give yourself a timeout. I've worked on marijuana legislation for 5 years, and you talk about the most stressful scenario I could have ever gotten involved with was marijuana. And I just did it because nobody else was going to do it, and we had this new industry in the state of Oklahoma. And so you have to try to figure out how to balance it, but while you're trying to do that, everybody's getting chewed out back home by the wild, wild west of weed, and you're trying to make it better and do things, and everybody in the building is like warring against you. Like last year, I had to literally teach myself to take time out and just go to my office, shut the door, and just calm down before I said something or did something to hurt someone.
What do you got, Arturo?
I'd say for me, I know one of the big things, me and some friends, and I try to keep friends that are separate from the political world. Luckily, just because I graduated as a mechanical engineer, most of my friends are engineers, which they like to talk a lot about science and tech and all that stuff. So it's kind of refreshing to go back and talk to those group of people that a lot of them don't even know what's going on politically. I'm like, you know what, let me go talk to my friends that aren't as aware with what's going on politically, because it's nice to have those boundaries in a way, those different groups that I can kind of lean on that are my support systems. We planned after session, we planned a camping trip where we backpacked around 30 miles. We tend to be very outdoorsy people, so that's what I'll do, just disconnect myself and find a place where I don't have connection to service, because I know if I'm connected, I'm going to be wanting to look at messages, look at phone calls, look at emails, but finding a way to kind of just separate myself from that for a temporary amount of time. I also like to play video games, so usually I'll be on what have I been playing? I like competitive games with friends, so I'm not great at them because I don't play as much video games as my friends, but things like Call of Duty, Fortnite, Minecraft, just building stuff. Just fine. Yeah, there we go.
Hey, he's only about 4 years older than me.
He's the young guy. He's in a different world than us.
Hey, I have a question, and the first hand in the air is who gets to answer the question. We've talked a lot about how do we handle this, what's it like, blah, blah, blah. I want to know, first hand in the air. That one don't count. First hand in the air after I state the question. What legislation do you want? Right there, yellow shirt, blonde hair.
Or red.
I want more education, more legislation guaranteeing access to books and information in education.
Okay. All right. So, if you don't mind, elaborate a little bit and tell me what it is currently that education is lacking as far as those issues in your mind, and where you get the data point
Tell us where you're from and who you are.
I'm Carl Lowry, representing Bryant City as the mayor. I'm from Bixby, Oklahoma. Being from the Tulsa area, this ninth grade, we learned about the Tulsa race, massacre or riot, depending on how you want to phrase. My history teacher at the time taught me that it wasn't even talked about 10 years ago. So we're clearly seeing some progress there, but at the same time, I can see legislation being passed in places like Florida that is limiting the books and information that even high school students are allowed to have in their public school libraries. So I would like to see some legislation protecting the teachers from being fired, especially, or prosecuted for just sharing information.
Well, what did we put? We put money to the Greenwood Project last year. That was a priority from last year. I wish Nichols would have been here as well because he could have talked specifically on that. But a lot of the legislation that you see, that's the contentious stuff that you see on TV, right? So you'll see a book was found in a school. Not talking about the race riots or anything else, but just talking about a school in Owasso or a school in Stillwater, whatever. There was a book that popped up and it was considered pornography. And so then we start getting calls. A lot of people want to jump through hoops, and there's a process in place already, right? So there is a process in place. It's already illegal to have porn in schools. Now there's a law that ran last year that Cal Hilbert ran, and it let the libraries that meet, the Librarians Association, they meet quarterly, and they go through their books. I mean, sometimes there's books that skip through, and they determine that, they put age limits on certain books or what have you, but there's a process in place. And so my deal was this year, before session, I was asked about, I do pre-session exit issues, and they said, what are you hoping for the year? And I said, I want to get back to normal things. I mean, I'm a proud Republican, I'm a rural Republican, but I want to get back to things that affect you directly: education, roads and bridges, jobs, and my rural area. A lot of the stuff that you see on TV is the contentious stuff, and it's abortion, it's guns, it's library books. Now, like I said, there was a lot. It's already against the law to have pornography in schools, so the system worked as it is. That teacher's not there. I believe the superintendent and the principal are not there either. So there's 3 separate incidents in the last 2 years where there were books that were found. The process worked, but like I mentioned, some people wake up and they want to get upset, and so you'll see something on Fox or CNN or whatever side you align with, and so you end up, running legislation because it is what it is. I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush, but my 40,000 people are different from their 40,000 and their 40,000. But when I've got 1,000 people from my district saying vote yes on this, I'm going to vote with the consensus. I mean, a lot of stuff I vote for, it's not. I'm not voting for personal stuff now. I vote the way it's a representative form of government, so I'm going to go with my district. Now I may believe. Like the stuff I'm voting for, but I'm not running stuff that's going to benefit me, personally. But I may believe that. But like I said, a lot of that stuff it's the hype in the media. I mean,
yeah, I don't think anybody really is looking to throw teachers in jail. I mean, that's not. I mean, that's the last thing on my mind. But what I do believe is that when my 6-year-old granddaughter goes to school, she ought to be in an environment that is no politics, no inappropriate stuff in the school. Now, I fundamentally will fight that all the way to the end. But nobody's trying to throw teachers in jail or get rid of teachers. I mean, my gosh, since Josh West and I've been there, we've put an additional $1.3 billion into the education budget. I mean, we have given teachers nearly $10,000 in pay raises. I mean, we have been involved in this education since the walkout, which, by the way, was when you were probably in middle school or maybe even elementary at this point. But nobody's trying to throw anybody in jail. The problem is this. You have some educators, and this is just a hard, cold fact. You have some educators who are activists, and they get out in front of their heels, and they do things that they shouldn't be doing. And they expose children to issues and things politically, thinking that they can change that child to become an activist. And I'll be damned if I will ever support a teacher trying to teach a kid to be a Republican or a Democrat. Teach them how to read, how to write, and how to do math, and how to have manners and discipline. That's all I want teachers to do.
I'd like to let Representative Swope weigh in on this for sure. Specifically, we were talking about Tulsa and some of the issues there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not an educator, I will say that, so I try to stay away from education policy, but it is a very big issue in our state. I mean, I think unfortunately not in our position, but I think that there is people on the state level that are trying to fire teachers, maybe not through the same mechanism that you were talking about, Representative Fettgatter, but I think that there is definitely somebody that has that idea in mind. You know, to me, I think that the conversation with education has been something that has just been drawn to this very emotional place. And I think that I can recognize that people want to get back to teaching the bare bones of what they feel education is. But I think that even whenever you have that conversation, that looks very differently. For instance, you mentioned manners. Manners look different to everybody. Even being in my district versus Representative West's district, we have probably different manners in our communities. And so I think that it's very hard for us to say, we just want you to learn this one thing. I know that I've reviewed the content of what people have talked about, and I probably have a different perspective growing up in Tulsa and being somebody that came from working at a sexual health organization where all of these things were talked about. I'm not a big believer that keeping information from children or kids or anybody makes anything better for them. I don't think I don't buy into the belief that exposure is going to lead you down that path whenever it's information. And so I think that there's been a lot of legislation put in place that kind of draws a hard line based on that fear. And I think that we should really consider what that's done to our system when it does leave us in this place where people feel like they can't even talk about the history of our own state here. And whether that's things like the race massacre that happened, whether that's how Native American tribes got here and things like that, I think it's really put a weight on a lot of teachers' shoulders to feel like they can't talk about these very important things. And I respect parents. That's a conversation that comes up a lot, I think, in the legislature. But I also respect kids. And I think that sometimes, you know, somebody else's parent doesn't have the best idea for what you need to learn about your life. That's one person's parent. And so I just think I try to look at it from more of a collective space where, yeah, some people may not want to have their kids learn about it, and maybe there should be opt-out options, but I don't think that that means that the information should be withheld from everybody.
I just want to address something here, if you don't mind. I mean, you know I have the highest amount of respect for you, but your opening statement that I'm not an educator, so I don't weigh in on education issues, I try not to. That is a fundamental flaw within our government system. I am not an educator, but you know what? I have kids and I have children, I have grandchildren now, and there is a leader of a large group of educators in the state of Oklahoma put a social media post out just this past week that said, if you do not have a child in school, your issues, your questions, and your points are moot to me. Now, that offends somebody who pays taxes to help educate you. And so I think that's the problem. We have more educators in the House of Representatives probably than ever in the history of the state. I mean, it used to be attorneys. God help us.
We need a few
but now
more
it's
of those.
educators. But the point is I think it's time for some non-educators to get involved in the conversation because we see things outside of the education bubble.
Yeah.
I want to get back to your point. My mom taught for 33 and a half years. My grandmother was a coach and teacher before her. So I grew up as a child of an educator, and I never heard my mom complain. I knew things were tight. I remember what it was to not have what I wanted, what all my friends had, because they weren't funded. I want to point out, Scott pointed out that the funding that they've done, the House has passed, and I've only been here 3, they've been here 1. The last 5 years, they've passed more money for education than the 27 years before that. Think about that. I mean, that's longer than this guy's been alive, right? So education is important. But getting back to the root of your question is, I never heard about the Tulsa Race Massacre when I was in high school. And I didn't graduate. I graduated this century, at least, so this millennium. Jared didn't. But got to point that out. But, you know, for me, access to information, I think really what you're hearing up here, at the end of the day, I think parents have a right to know what's being taught. And I don't mind my kids being challenged in what they think, because at the end of the day, I know they're going to come home, we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to let them figure that out. And I don't have any doubt that when their faith and the fundamentals that we've put in place go through the process, I trust them in the result. And more than that, I trust God in the result. And so, to your point, I hope nobody's keeping those books about that out of school. I absolutely agree. We don't need anything, you know, pornographic in school and things like that. But at the end of the day, if that stuff's being kept out of your school, then I want to know about it. And to Scott's point, I'm not an education guy. I'm an attorney. I wanted to intentionally stay out of education because that was such a hot topic. I didn't want all the arrows that came with it. And now I'm chairman of higher education and career tech. So sometimes those things find you. And so I would tell you, and that is more advice for y'all, when something seeks you out, don't run from it, because it's a part of a plan that's bigger than you. So lean into it and do the things that are tough, even when you don't really want to, because it takes us all. It takes all perspectives. Like, it can't just be educators patrolling. It can't just be parents. It takes us all. It takes all of our perspectives.
Well, if you could only vote on laws that
everything we pass is a law, so I could vote on all of them.
Well, you could vote on all, but if you had to be that freaking profession to be able to vote on something, it would never work out. So I think everybody feels one reason education bills get so they get out there and people are so passionate about it because everybody feels connected to them. Like Scott mentioned, first of all, they're paying taxes, whether they have kids in school or not. But most people are, especially K through 12, you graduate high school, you have kids in school, you have grandkids in school. So I remember after 2018, after that election cycle, I was talking to my guy at my church named Mr. Till. He was my 7th grade math teacher, and now they want to be a principal, and he's an accreditation officer. But I was asked on a TV show by Scott Mitchell, and he said, we passed this additional funding for education. Why do we still have so many people, so many emergency certified teachers? Why do we still have problem recruiting people going to the profession? And I was talking to Mr. Till, and he's like, well, you know what, Wes, when you were a kid, I could take you out in the street or out in the dirt with a stick, and I could teach you math. He said, now, if you're a teacher, you have to not only be a teacher, you have to be a counselor and a nurse and an aunt and a parent and all kinds of other stuff. So who wants to go to school for 4 years and take on debt and work for, whatever, we control the minimum salary at the state, but it's most schools aren't at that. But go to work for $45,000 a year. Not very many people, so we got to figure out how to, recruit people into that. My wife's a therapist, and she was paying her therapist, starting them out straight out of college at $105,000 a year. She couldn't get him to come to rural Oklahoma, even paying that. So imagine trying to, have a teacher coming in at $45,000 a year. So that's an issue too. And to the kid that had the question about adversities, I look at adversities as you need adversity in life. I mean, if I didn't go through it, if I was a poor kid from Delaware County and my garage is bigger than the house I was raised in, and I used those things as a child, growing up, those adversities that I faced to build me and to grow me, you need that. It's good to have adversities. That's a big part of an issue with kids today. I'm not saying that you don't go through adversities, but that's an issue that you don't have to go through, a lot of stressors. And I use that as motivation. I was in the military. I got shot 3 times in Iraq in 2003. I got shot in both my legs and my stomach. I had a traumatic brain injury. Spent a year in the hospital. And when I'm at the Capitol, I'm not no one's trying to shoot me, right? So that's kind of how I look at the Capitol, the stressors. But to Anthony's point, you got to have good people around you. I don't live anywhere near the Capitol, and so that's where we all stay at the apartment and we play dominoes. But you got to have the relationships help it too. But don't fold on adversity. I mean, use those and build. Use those as building blocks in your life, because I think that will strengthen you and put you above your peers, honestly.
And when it comes to going back to education, I know one of the big things, especially with the rhetoric being put out about teachers, things like calling teachers terrorists our state superintendent calling teachers terrorists. That type of rhetoric is dangerous. And I mean, I would love to see a lot of my colleagues, especially from the Republican side, to call out that kind of rhetoric, because it's not productive. It doesn't benefit anyone. Regardless of, I think the conversation had to do with teachers unions. Regardless of how you feel about teachers unions, we need to make sure that the rhetoric that's being put out about teachers isn't attacking them, because we're already suffering so much when it comes to education and making sure that we keep teachers in Oklahoma, because our universities are some of the best when it comes to producing quality teachers. We don't trust them. We don't let them teach what they want, what they think is important for students to learn, because society, the world is continuously evolving and changing. And one of the things I'm excited about, especially about our generation, because I guess I'm the only Gen Zer in the Capitol, we're the smartest generation. And I say that because we're the generation that's had the most access to resources, most access to technology. And that can have its pros and cons, because right now sometimes I'm like, man, this is so much information, what do I do with it? But there's no other generation that, I guess is currently still alive, that has had as much access to information as we do. And I think one of the benefits is that we're able to better access things like empathy, have better access to people's experiences. So whenever we push out policies, whenever we push out a certain narrative, I mean, people from our generation are really seeing that and thinking critically about those things that are being put out there, because we're seeing it on our social medias, on the internet, on YouTube, everywhere, right? And I think that does lead to more uncomfortable conversations in schools, because, I mean, everyone has a phone, right? I mean, if not, most of us at least have access to the internet or phones. And with that, I mean, at the tips of our fingers, we have access to pretty much all the information that there is out there in the world. And we have access to the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I do think that because of that, more young people especially are beginning to question more about, like, hey, why is it that, maybe there's a certain group of people that are being attacked for whatever reason. And then teachers are having to really try to start that conversation when, I mean, historically that hasn't been the case. Because, I mean, me being a young person, I've recognized, because I've had so much more access to information, that the world is so much bigger than my city or my town. Because now I have access to information across the globe.
Unless it's Chain City, right?
Okay, let's get another question. Right here, front row. You're going to have to talk louder, sorry.
Hello, my name is Gavin Finley. I'm from Bethany. I'm representing Washington City. What is one specific thing that got you to the position you want today?
Specific thing that got you where you are today.
I wasn't looking for this job. I was involved in my community and had some people ask me to run for this. I mean, my brother-in-law would tell you that it's almost 35 now, 35 years ago when, I graduated high school, loaded up a U-Haul van, and moved to California to be a rock star. I wore lipstick and long hair and high-heel boots, and I wasn't looking to do this, but just I was involved in the community. And by the way, just for your benefit, I think Ryan Walters is a jerk. I mean, he's causing problems, but so there, your colleagues have said it publicly, but I wasn't looking for this job. But I am very tenacious, and when I don't believe there's a single thing I cannot do, and I think that's what people saw in me and asked me to run for.
Well, I think that you guys know Jared Harrison, your COO back there? Yeah. Give it up for Jared. All of life is about relationships. The reason I drove 3+ hours across the state of Oklahoma is because Jared and I went to law school together, and there's not anything I wouldn't do for him if he called me, because I know if I called him, he'd do the same. And that's what life is about. And so when I graduated law school, I got married, we had 2 kids. I wanted my kids to grow up with the opportunities I had in rural Oklahoma, because In Clinton, you can play 7 sports all at the same time, and you can be on every team and have every opportunity. You know, if I'm at Edmond, boy, by 7th grade, I better decide which sport I'm going to play and be really good at that if I'm going to have a chance to play, right? And some of you are probably really great athletes and play more than one, but I'm talking about me here, so you know, I didn't have to pick. But when I moved back, I credited those around me, first my faith, but my family. But those around me gave me every opportunity I had. So I said yes to every opportunity to give back. I was on the city chamber. I was on school foundation trust. I was on the nursing home board. You guys are like, why would you want to be on the nursing home board? Because they asked me. And those people in that nursing home had given their whole lives, and they needed it. So I said yes. And that's how I got here. I said no about 7 times before I finally said yes to be here. But you guys all know we were put on this earth to serve, not to be served. And I had an opportunity to serve 40,000 people. I'd been doing everything I could since I moved home to serve 8,000 in Clinton. And my wife and I talked about it a lot, and she was the reason I didn't do it. My youngest kid was 2 when I signed up to run. I didn't want to be gone from home knocking doors throughout rural western Oklahoma. I wanted to be there for I didn't want to miss baseball games because I'm at the Capitol. You know, Josh and I miss baseball games every week, you know, and watching on FaceTime, you know, trying to cheer for my son at his baseball game. You know, it's tough. But at the end of the day, we're here to serve. And that's why we do it. And so to your question, that's what got me here was I said yes to an opportunity. And it's not our job to determine where it ends. Our job is to do the best we can with the path that we have in front of us. And if I lose tomorrow and go home, I'll be better for it. I won't lose so much money. And my last campaign, I kept saying, if my worst case scenario is I make more money and spend more time with my family, don't threaten me with a good time, right? So at the end of the day, say yes, give back, serve. That's really what it comes down to.
We got term limits too, so 12 years goes by really quick. So when you get elected, man, you gotta you never know if you're going to be there in the House. You know, we got to run every 2 years, and so you got to get what you can done in the time you have. When I was a kid, I was probably 10. I mentioned Rick Littlefield, one of my predecessors. I was in Cub Scouts, and I was selling popcorn. Rick was a rep at the time, and I went by his office in town there, and he had a picture in his office of him and President Reagan, him and the governor. And I was asking my dad, I was like, "What's Mr. Littlefield again?" And he said, "He's our rep." And so I told my mom, I said, "I want to be like Mr. Rick," and so she kind of always held that over my head. And then I joined the military, and honestly, the decisions I made as a young person and a young adult, I ensured that I wouldn't screw up my chances. You know, not that I didn't do stupid stuff, but I didn't get caught, I guess. But I didn't want to mess up my chances of doing this. And so when I moved back to Oklahoma in 2010, my predecessor, Dr. Cox, he was halfway through his tenure, and so when he was terming out in 16, so he came to my house in 15. He was my neighbor, and so that helped. But he said, "You gonna run for my seat?" And I said, "I think so." And he said, "Well, come out to the house." And so we have a legislative event every year on Grand Lake, and so there was a bunch of reps and senators there. Todd Lamb was the lieutenant governor; he was out there, and so I'm out there, and a lady named Anastasia Pittman. She was a Democrat from Oklahoma City, a senator at the time. She was a House member, but she was friends with Dr. Cox, and so she came up, and she was riding a jet ski, and she came up. She said, "Are you going to run?" I said, "I'm thinking about it." And she said, "What's holding you back?" And I said, "Well, you know, my kids were 1 and 2. My daughters were 1 and 2. My boys were 7 and 8. And I said, you know, rural Oklahoma, got to raise a bunch of money. My kids are young." And she said, "Well, you know, that doesn't matter. Rural or urban, those are issues that everybody has to deal with." And she said, "Have you prayed about this boy?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "You talked to your pastor?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "We're going to have a prayer right now." So she got on the dock and was like laying hands on me like a Pentecostal pastor. She's bringing the spirit down. But during her prayer, God Bless America came on the radio. And she said, "There's your sign, Wes. You're going to have to run." And so the doors just opened from there. And you know, what gets you there is hard work. And what keeps you there is keeping, you know, doing what you say you're going to do. So that's my advice, or what's got me here and kept me here, I guess.
For me, going back to what I said, you know, a year ago, the plan for me was not to get into the world of politics. A year ago, I was just looking for an apartment down in Austin, Texas. Had a job lined up. I was going to get paid fairly well, just under 6 figures as a mechanical engineer. I was going to work for Samsung, doing semiconductor chips, and stuff that I was always super interested about. I mean, I've always been a big tech guy. I would always build myself little robots just because I thought it was fun, and I still do that in my free time. And I had a whole 5-year plan set out. Work 2 to 3 years, go to grad school at UT Austin, even though my friends gave me a lot of crap because I'm a big OU guy. So, the whole OU versus Texas. Yeah, horns down all the way. And at the beginning of last year, there was a group of leaders from my community that reached out to me, just hit me up on Facebook, and it's like, hey, do you have time to meet up for dinner? I'm like, man, I haven't talked to this guy since high school. I'm like, why is he hitting me up? So I meet up with them, and they essentially
You say you hadn't talked to him since high school?
Yeah, because
So
in
that's
high
like
school I did a lot of
3 years ago.
yeah, I did and throughout college we kind of kept
That
up
was
throughout college.
25% of his life.
I
Leave him
forgot.
alone.
Yeah.
Don't.
I'm just playing with you.
I graduated in 2017, high school in 2017, and last year in college. But they reached out to me, and they're like, hey, Arturo, would you be interested in running for the State House of Representatives? And at first I'm like, okay, why me of all people? Am I even old enough? Am I qualified? I didn't know that you only needed to be 21 and registered to vote in your district to run for office. I would have thought you needed to be like 40, 50 years old. Because, whenever you think of a politician, you don't think of a young, brown dude that's an engineer. You probably think of someone like the other guys are up here.
What are you saying?
Right?
What are you saying? I'm Choctaw, so.
But it's not politics is not something I ever had thought about in that way, because engineers, we tend to be very politically disengaged because it doesn't make sense to us. Engineers, we tend to be logical, rational. We back up our decisions with data, statistics, incredible sources. And all that tends to fly out the window in the world of politics. And that's why, most of my engineering friends, whenever I talk to them about it, they were like, Arturo, are you good? I'm like, why would you even think about running for office? This isn't something, you'd do a good job as an engineer. Like, don't do it. But at the end of the day, it took me a month to decide whether to run or not. More like a month and a half.
I'm starting to question the smartest generation.
Give him a minute.
Don't let me talk to you.
I'm kidding you, man. You're going to take a little ribbon.
But at the end of the day, going back to my upbringing, I faced all sorts of adversity. I come from a family that's very low in the socioeconomic, whatever it's called, very low-income family. Like I said, I'm the first in my family to go to high school, go to college, and graduate. And I think because of being able to embrace adversity, build resilience, and really focus on building and maintaining meaningful relationships, and always giving back. Throughout high school, I always volunteered for people because I recognize that my part of town is a part of town that's been left out of politics in many different ways. Because a little bit more details about my district. It's 70% Hispanic. It's pretty much all low-income families. And most of the families that I represent, they're not thinking about all these cultural issues that we see in the media. They're focused on trying to make sure that their families are being taken care of. They have, they're keeping the lights on. They have food at the table, and they just want to make sure that they have what they need day by day. That's going back to my family. That's how it was. My parents, I didn't realize how we had it because they did a good job at making sure that we had everything we needed. Even though oftentimes, it was a challenge. But making sure that those families and those stories are being elevated. And that's a big reason why I decided to put my career and a well-paying job on pause to make sure that my district was being represented well, because going back to my district being 70% Hispanic, that's a lot of people that only really speak Spanish. And luckily I'm bilingual, so I can communicate with both parts of my community, which historically has never been represented fully. So just making sure I give people a voice, making sure that these people are represented well. That's a big
Representative
reason I ran.
Swope, very quickly.
Sure. I'll just say volunteering. That's something Arturo did talk on a little bit. But a lot of that is what got me here. That's how I got started in politics. I really volunteered for campaigns before I finally took paid work, probably about 4 or 5 years in. I had just done it in addition to working a full-time job. And also even volunteering in college for stuff that wasn't related to campaigns, but just, it's kind of like he said, it's making connections, and volunteering is a great way to do that. And so, yeah, taking opportunities that are presented to you, do that, volunteer, build connections. I think in the world that I was in, what was my final push was just, it started to get, the more that I was organizing, the more I was getting involved in policy and politics. I think that you start to feel more and more of a responsibility to get involved at a certain point. And so that's kind of what happened with me, and I think that COVID is kind of where that hit, and then coming out of that, I was asked to run, and so that's kind of the catalyst that got me here.
We have time for one more really good question, and as you can tell, legislators like to talk. So I'm going to ask on this last question if we just keep it to about 2 minutes each, because we're going to have to wrap up. Because my brother-in-law's up here and he loves to talk. Okay, I got a good question.
Is
it a good question?
Is it a really good question?
All right, let's go.
He's got like 7 people saying that one.
So my name is Landon Benson. I'm from Grove, Oklahoma, of Delaware County.
There you go.
I'm representing Bloxham City of Patrick County. So my question for you, gentlemen and lady, is there some kind of correlation between which side you sway politically? Because it would seem to me, in a general sense, that younger people tend to sway more Democratic and older people tend to sway a little more Republican.
So did you guys hear his question in the back? No. Okay, his question was, does it change by your age? He said in his opinion, is that fair? Is that what you said? Your opinion, younger people tend to lean more Democratic, older people lean more Republican. I can't remember if it was Reagan's quote that said that, you graduate college and everybody's Democrat and everybody's progressive, and then you get a job and have kids and start paying taxes and everybody becomes Republican. So you're not the first person to think that because you want to be more conservative when you're making money. You're right. I would tell you that's true to some degree. I think a lot of it's where you live. I think Grove, Oklahoma, I think if you polled the high school, I think you probably have more conservatives than progressives in the high school in Grove, America, just like Clinton, America. You guys know what a rung is? If I say high rung or low rung, does that mean anything to you? Rungs on a ladder, right? I don't care. If you don't hear anything else I say the entire night, I don't care where you are, left or right. I care where you are on the rungs of the ladder. I'm not talking lateral, I'm talking vertical. We all go up and down with what we think. We get very primitive, low thinking sometimes, and sometimes we get very high and try to be very thoughtful in what we think. We get to college football, we all get real primitive, right? We start horns down and everybody gets real primitive, and we're going to bare knuckle fist fight. When you're thinking about anything, but especially politically, I would challenge all of you to try your best to always be in the higher rungs, wherever you are, left or right. I really honestly don't care, because I'm not trying to push you one way or another for my agenda, because I want to run for office someday and I want you to vote for me. So I'm just going to tell you the truth. Be high thinkers. I want you guys to not listen to the nonsense you see on social media. Arturo made a comment earlier about, yes, our state superintendent called teachers terrorists. How many of you have ever heard someone call a teacher a terrorist in your high school? Anybody? No, not one. Because it's not on social media. That's not life. Stay away from the news. Stay away from the social media. It's fine to interact with them. I'm on social media, and I watch the news every once in a while when the storms get bad, right? But when you get away from that, be high-rung thinkers. Have communication with people. Do your own research. Read. Be articulate. And don't be afraid to have conversations with people that you disagree with. That's how you develop. That's how you grow. And so that's what I would tell you, is I really don't care if you end up left or right. I care if you end up high rung or low rung. I want you to be intelligent in what you think. Sorry, that may have been more than 2 minutes.
That was way over 2 minutes, brother. I'll take 2 minutes. I would say I agree with Anthony. It probably depends on the area of the state that you're from. And you're probably right. I remember my sister-in-law was in medical school, and it was when Bernie was running for president. They were all voting for Bernie. They wanted, until they figured out that they were going to be doctors and paying for somebody else's college someday. And so that has a lot to do with it. I've never asked somebody when they call my office if they're Republican or Democrat. I don't care. I'm a Republican, like I said. I'm a rural Republican, and so even the Republicans are different. Rural and urban Republicans are different. That's one reason Colin Walker and I started the podcast 3 years ago, where we could say, and he decided not to run. But he was a progressive Democrat from Oklahoma City, But we'd show people on the show. We would talk about really contentious stuff, but I didn't have to I didn't sit across the table from Colin and call him a baby killing Democrat, and he'd call me a gun-toting redneck from Delaware County. He didn't do that. We would talk about these issues just like we're talking here, and to show people that it's okay to have difference of opinion. And you need adversarial friction in government. That honestly, if everybody thought like me, it'd be freaking awesome. But we've been doing some crazy stuff, so it's good to get a difference of opinion, right? And so yeah, who knows? I tell people, your political opinion is probably based off your parents. Whether they watch Fox or CNN or whatever. Be independent thinkers and develop your own. Maybe not hers. I see her shaking her head. But yeah. Like I said, I don't care. I'm just glad you're here, and I'm glad you're participating in government. If you haven't not paged yet, you still got one more use. You get with your rep and your senator and to put in for the page program too. It's a pretty cool experience. Definitely. I kept it at 2 minutes.
Good job. Not quite.
Yeah, so there is a quote, if you're not a liberal when you are young, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative when you're old, you have no brain. So I would say this. There are very few issues that really separate us idealistically. We fight over those issues a lot, and we believe strongly. I mean, Arturo and Representative Swope, they believe emphatically what they believe in their ideals, and so do I. But I'm a guy who I got a girl pregnant when I was a teenager, and she had an abortion. And I didn't have any say in that. And that child was half mine. And I dealt with that mentally until I was in my mid-30s, when I had to finally put it to rest because it was driving me crazy. I mean, I just shared a personal story with you. Therefore, I will always be pro-life. I will always believe that the man should have some say in his child. And I will also say, if any of you all get somebody pregnant, you better take care of your kids, too.
I don't know whether to.
We got enough deadbeat dads in this world, but there are very few things that separate us politically, but we vehemently believe what we believe, but that doesn't mean we have to hate each other.
That's right.
Well, tough act to follow. Let's see. Well, I come from a family where my dad is a Republican and my mom is a Democrat. She was elected too, so very interesting household to grow up in. They're divorced. Maybe that's why. Possibly. I don't think it's necessarily related to anything regarding taxes either. I'm a single woman. I don't have kids. I pay a lot of taxes in this state, and I don't see myself changing parties anytime soon. What I will tell you is that based on working in voting organization and things like that, that they will tell you that the more people are educated about the voting process and the more people that are engaged in that process, the more democratic societies tend to be. And so I would say that Oklahoma is not a red state. It is a non-voting state. And I would say that maybe there's a reason that they don't want education to be a priority here. And that maybe if it were, our state would look very different.
I wish we had another hour, but we don't.
So she waited till we were all done.
No kidding, man. That was
Yeah, it's coming, though.
That was a grenade.
And just thinking about my,
Mine rings off.
I guess, political partisanship. Like I said, a year ago I was not thinking about politics, and I wasn't partisan leaning in any certain way. I have always been a registered independent up until I decided to run. And whenever I decided to choose my party, I was very objective, and I just put the two party platforms side by side, and I was okay, where do I fall when it comes to these two platforms? And based off that decision, that was very objective, I guess. It was very... And then I guess also going back and thinking, really reflecting on my experiences and the kind of life I've grown up in, I saw myself more in the Democratic Party. Sometimes, on very few occasions, sometimes I'm more on the moderate side. But I think right now, for me at least, it's been a journey to really understand, and that's why I try to have conversations with people from both sides of the aisle to really understand where I fall. Because right now, there's a lot of issues I've never spoken about, I've never even thought about. I'm like, man, like, where do I fall in this? That's kind of a question I've always been asking myself these past few months, because I'm telling you, I went from 0 to 100 in the world of politics in the span of a few months. So for me, it's been a big learning curve just to be more self-aware about where I fall politically. And I know that's going to be one of those things, going back to the quotes that were mentioned. Maybe later on in life I might change and become more conservative in some ways, or maybe I'll become more democratic, more progressive about things, because on some issues I see myself being more progressive, and I'm like, oh. So I continue to surprise myself, but I just make sure to think critically and really make sure I'm seeing things not just from a single perspective, because we do have, I mean, based off of our own lived experiences and the people we've surrounded ourselves with, that's going to impact how we see the world, our perceived reality. So just make sure to think critically, surround yourself with different people that have a different way of thinking, and I think at the end of the day, that'll be the best thing for you to know where you fall politically.
Okay, we have to wrap up. I'm sorry. I know they're...
Believe Democrats are the only one that care about their education. You're wrong.
I didn't even hear what he said.
I want to take, before our director comes out, we've got some parting gifts for our representatives, but I want to take a little point of personal privilege. My father served in the state Senate as a Democrat, and let me tell you, it is not easy in Oklahoma to be in the minority party. Regardless of what my brother here says, it's tough. And I heard it from my dad a lot. It's frustrating. And these two freshman representatives, I want to say it takes a lot of guts to do what they're doing. And I want to give them a round of applause for...
Absolutely.
Especially going up, I mean, these are very experienced legislators, and we have term limits now, and what happens is the learning curve is very steep. And so next year they'll be seasoned, and these guys are very seasoned, so it's tough. So I want to say how much me as moderator, these are all now friends of mine. Some of it I've known longer than others, but I really appreciate them coming and spending time with us up here. They came a long ways. And let's give them one big round of applause. Mr. Director.
I want to thank you guys for all of the great questions tonight. That was fantastic. I think this was a pretty good group this year, yes? And certainly our legislatures. I think Director Emeritus Clay said it best, so I won't reiterate. But you do have my thanks as well, gentlemen, for coming out here. Some of you with very long drives. So, Jared, thank you for making good friends in law school. It's paid off. But it's fantastic. These are real-life people making real-life laws that affect you, and they're here to tell you about it because one of these days you're going to be in their seats. So this has been great. And on behalf of Boys State, we've got some swag bags for all of you guys. I believe we've got T-shirts in here. We've got some hats, the director's coin, and our tribute putter together. Notice that you all like to wear blazers, so we got you our little lapel pin just in case you might want to wear one of these days. So,
nice.
Thank you guys very much.